Hey guys, so this week we're talking about Catherine de Medici, and I already did this episode over on Patreon, but also please forgive the audio quality. It was a long time ago and I've learned a lot. Enjoy! Hi, and welcome to Long Live the Queen, where we talk about the women who made history. And by we, I mean the royal we, because it's just me. Today we're going to talk about Catherine de Medici.
One day we will be remembered.
Normally it's just me, but not this time. This time I have my best sister Steph here.
Best and only sister.
But still the best. I mean, technically the worst, but also the best.
Oh,
I mean,
I like to think I'm a fine wine. I'm aging better.
Oh, 100%. 100%. Thank you for joining me. I like having company on my podcast.
It's fun. Now we're podcasting out of 2 different states.
Yeah. Steven jokes that I started my podcast just to trick people into talking about history with me. He's not totally wrong.
Probably true.
It's a little bit true, yeah. Okay, we're going to cover Catherine de Medici today. Catherine de Medici was born on the 13th of April, 1519, in the Republic of Florence. Yeah, she's real close to your birthday.
Only a few hundred years off.
Yeah, 400. No, way more than that. Almost 500.
We can't do math on a Saturday. That's not
right.
Fired.
You weren't born in 1919, so it was more than 400. Her parents got together because the Pope wanted to make a deal with King Francois I of France against the Holy Roman Emperor. So at this time, the Holy Roman Emperor was Charles V, and he was pretty young. He was early 20s. The King of France was King Francois I, and he was also in his 20s. He was a little older, but not much. And the King of England was King Henry VIII, who was also in his 20s. So those 3 guys kind of had a love-hate relationship. They kind of all 3 hated each other, but they would team up 2 versus 1 in different configurations at various times. But also they're kind of like frenemies. They don't like each other.
But they needed each other.
Yeah. So the Holy Roman Emperor and King Francois I were like, let's team up against King Henry. He's kind of a lame guy. And they're not totally wrong. Her father, Catherine de Medici's father, was the nephew of the Pope. And through that, he got control of the Dukedom of Florence. So he was a Nepo baby, and that was questionably legal. The Pope was just like, here, have Florence. And so the old family that ruled Florence was like, no, that's not cool. You can't just give it to your family because you like them. So they needed an ally. And her mother was a distant relative of the King of France. So kind of both Nepo babies. They're Nepo baby squared in this relationship.
And that's kind of now, right?
Yeah.
Because most kids marry each other.
Yes. It was definitely like distant royal relative. So not super royal, but definitely, in the noble group. And then a super rich guy who was related to the Pope. And they were like, we can make a good team.
Not weird cousins, but like they definitely probably knew each other.
Maybe not, because her father would have been from Italy and her mother would have been from France. It was more of an arranged marriage. They didn't know each other, but they were both from similar kind of powerful families. One was just more like government powerful because related to the king, and one was more, I'm super rich, so I know a lot of important people, powerful.
I feel like I could have been successful with an arranged marriage.
Yeah, depending on who's picking your person.
Oh, that's true. You can pick my person.
In this situation, it would be our parents, so I don't know who you would have ended up with.
Awkward.
Right? So the couple were married, and they seemed to like each other because they were expecting immediately, because Catherine was born just 10 months after her parents' marriage. So they started real quick.
Honeymoon baby.
Yep. Her parents were described as being as pleased as if she had been a boy, which kind of sad.
I'm pretty happy, actually.
Yeah. They're like, oh, well, you know what? It's a girl, but we can work with this.
Girl and they weren't disappointed. I feel like that's success in life.
Right. For a fortnight, they were a family, but just a fortnight, because when Catherine was just 15 days old, her mother died.
Oh my gosh, I thought you were going to say she got pregnant. I was like, what?
No. Another baby,
What's
15 days later. 2 weeks.
Okay.
So for 2 weeks, they were a family, and then on day 15, her mom died. And we don't know exactly what she died of.
Probably sepsis.
Probably. She was 21, and they do suspect childbed fever. But it could have been the plague, or it could have been syphilis, because her husband did have syphilis.
It'd be awkward to be like, let's get married, by the way, I have syphilis.
Right. So, just 6 days after his wife died, Lorenzo also died, her father. So, when she's 21 days old, she's an orphan.
Oh.
I know, just 3 weeks.
At least she's rich.
Yeah.
Probably like a nanny or someone.
Yeah, well, it gets worse before it gets better.
Oh, yeah.
And he died of what they call being worn out by disease and excesses. And we're pretty sure that's code for syphilis. We don't know for sure because that's all they wrote down. But it seems like they're like, well, he lived a life.
Excesses of women.
Yes. And disease. He just then worn him out. Too many ladies and STIs.
Oh, gross.
Yeah. So the Pope, her dad's uncle, made 21-day-old Catherine Duchess of Urbino. And they called her the Duchessina, which means the little Duchess in Italian. So that's kind of a cute name. Duchessina.
That's cute. I might call one of my kids that.
But she was only the Duchessina in name only.
What do you mean in name only?
Well, in name only because he annexed anything that would make money to the Papal States. So he was taking all the money, the Pope was.
Oh.
But on paper, she was the Duchess. But she's a 3-week-old baby. He's like, what does she need money for? She's a baby.
She's a little girl in the...
She's an orphan. Yeah. That might be the start.
Title is probably what she needs anyway.
Right. So baby Catherine was sent to her paternal grandmother, whose name was, this is very Italian, her grandmother's name was Alfonsina Orsini, which is the most Italian of Italian names, I feel like.
Like a certain someone that we know that has a super Italian name too.
Yes, exactly like that. But her grandmother, by the time of Catherine's birth, was already in such poor health that she could no longer walk. She was bedridden. And when Catherine was just 10 months old, her grandmother also died.
Oh.
I know, it's
rough.
If she grew up thinking she was a curse, I could maybe understand why she would maybe think that. I don't think she was, but...
Was that fairly common, though? People just to die?
Yeah, and her grandmother was older. I mean, you can't expect grandmothers to live that long back then. So, and she was already sick when Catherine was born. So it was probably going to happen sooner rather than later. So at this point, she went to live with her aunt Clarice de Medici, which is her father's older sister. Clarice, which I'm working on my pronunciation because it's just spelled Clarice. But word on the street is it's pronounced in Italian, Clarice.
I would have said Clarice.
Yeah. Someone's commented on my podcast, you need to work on your pronunciation. And I'm trying, but I feel like my American accent is real thick. So I do my best.
That person's listening. You can suck an apple.
I mean, they're not wrong. I'm open to suggestions for, how to pronounce things, but I'm real American, and I feel like it comes out in my voice.
Well, if you need any, Haitian words, I'm here for you.
I feel like they should just appreciate that I say the Duke of Orleans, and I don't say the Duke of Orleans, because if I was talking in my American accent, it's the Duke of Orleans. That's not how they say it in France.
It really annoys me when people say foyer.
Yeah, exactly.
A lot. Snobby amount of way. I'm like, ugh.
Yep. No, I totally... I don't want to sound like that person who's that person.
It's French. It's French. It's foyer.
I'm trying. So, Clarice had a brood of children of her own. So now Catherine had cousins, and they were sort of like siblings. She was living in a home. And when Catherine was 2.5... so this is about 1.5 years later, Pope Leo also died. That's her Pope uncle guy, the one who's taken all her money but technically made her a duchess, the Duchessina. This caused problems because the only reason the Medici family was powerful was because they were rich and because they were related to the Pope. And Pope Leo was supposed to be Pope longer. He died unexpectedly earlier than they thought he would. And so that they lost a lot of power when he died. And there was a lot of unrest and a lot of hatred for Catherine's family, the Medicis. They were like, well, now they don't have the Pope, so they're rich, but we can hate them. And the next Pope only poped for about 1.5 years, and then he died early too. And then Pope Clement II was elected. Pope Clement II, as it was called at birth, Giulio de' Medici. So they're back. We had a short little 1.5 year break, and now we have another Medici pope.
Were they related?
Yeah, they're all part of the same powerful Italian family.
Oh, okay.
And they're not royal, but they are very wealthy. They come from a powerful banking family. So
I mean, I feel like if you're in the Pope family in a Catholic country, you might as well be royalty, in all honesty.
Right. And well, the reason that there's so many Medici popes is likely because they were so rich. There was probably some paying off that was happening. And they would use their Medici popes to nominate Medici cardinals. So, like, there's always a backup. Like, there's another Medici ready to take over if this one dies. It was full nepotism. When Catherine was about 8 years old, Florence was overthrown by a faction that opposed Medici rule. There were rebels in the city. They took over the city completely, and they hated Catherine's family. Catherine, at 8 years old, remember she's still little, was seized and housed in a series of convents. They were like, look, we can't let her be free, but also she's a child, so send her to the nuns, and then she'll be out of the way. And she was in a few different convents. The last convent she was in, they wanted nothing to do with men. And this was the time when she spent the most time there. And she seems to have remembered this convent very fondly. She donated money to them until she died.
Okay, I have a little bit of a rabbit trail I need to ask a question about.
Yes.
I swear to God, this sounds so familiar. I think this is like a Netflix or like a Prime series.
Have you watched The Serpent Queen?
No. I'm looking it up. It actually,
Okay.
The Medicis. It was on Netflix.
Okay, yeah. I think that's about Cosimo de' Medici, so I think that's like her great-grandfather, I want to say.
Okay.
So it's earlier than that, but same family.
Okay. I have some frame reference.
If you at some point want to watch The Serpent Queen, that's also, I think it's Stars, and that's specifically, The Serpent Queen is Catherine de' Medici. So that's literally about her.
Okay.
So this convent that Catherine was living in, that she reportedly was pretty fond of, was walled in. They wanted nothing to do with men to the point where they were walled in and the doors were always like completely shut. You didn't leave the property. Men didn't come in. There was a revolving shelf in the wall that people could like leave presents on or tithing, or so you could get presents, but you weren't getting any hugs from like your uncle or whatever. No men allowed.
I mean, who fixed the things? Because back then it was like a man thing.
Yeah, I mean, I think the nuns just kind of like, I mean, they didn't have a lot to fix. They were living pretty
Sparse.
simply. Yeah. And they would
That
make money
helps.
by like making lace or sewing dresses. They were kind of just like a closed off community, and there wasn't a ton to fix. So 2 years after the rebels seized Florence, 2 years, the rebels still have it for 2 years. The Holy Roman Emperor had the city under siege. And it wasn't clear who the Holy Roman Emperor was going after, because he had also sacked Rome and taken the Pope captive. So they weren't together, and it wasn't super clear why he was coming to attack the city that she lived in. And she was growing up basically in a war zone. They were under siege, and they started with a lot of money. But when you put a city under siege, the first thing you do is you burn down all the farms around the city. So what you have is what you have, and you're not getting any more. And it turned out that the Holy Roman Emperor was working with the Pope, kind of. It was like quid pro quo. The Holy Roman Emperor had sacked Rome, taken the Pope hostage. And this is the same Pope that Henry VIII was trying to get his divorce from. But his ex-wife, or his future ex-wife, is the aunt of this Holy Roman Emperor. So basically his wife's nephew took the Pope captive, and then the Pope was like, no, sorry, you can't get a divorce. I live with this guy now.
He's my boo.
Yeah, they were working together, but they weren't friends. That one of them was being held captive by the other one. But
I mean, how bad karma are you asking for yourself to kidnap the Pope?
Right. And they kind of made a deal where he was like, look, you're captured, but here's what I need from you so that I don't have to kill you. And also killing the Pope is a bad look. So he's Catholic. So he probably is like, ooh, this is a lot. This is real borderline. Because he was Catholic. So he, in theory, respected the Pope. He said, I'm going to need you to tell my aunt's husband no divorce. And the Pope said, okay, but I'm going to need you to go get Florence back. Because I have relatives in there. And the rebels aren't safe people for them to be around. So he was like, okay, I'll go get Florence back. So he put the city under siege. And they had some food, but like I said, they burned all the farms, so there was no more food. There was going to be no harvest this year or next year. And people started to starve. The poor people first, obviously, because the wealthier people had more of a stockpile.
And fat.
Yeah. And then the plague also broke out because it's just, I mean, they're surrounded by the army, and that's when the plague is going to break out.
That's why I think I'll be okay if there's some sort of economic collapse in America.
Well, you still need to eat, but yeah.
At least a few months.
Yeah. It helps. It helps. As the siege went on, multiple suggestions were made about how to get the siege to end without just giving up, because the rebels didn't want to give up and be like, okay, take your city back. They had it for 2 years, and they were like, wanted to keep it. So some of the suggestions included Catherine being killed and exposed naked and chained to the city walls. Oh. That seems excessive.
Harsh.
And some people suggested she be lowered over the walls alive and just let the emperor's army rape her if they want to.
Oh.
So also pretty crappy.
Bad option.
And finally, the city fell to the siege on the 12th of August, 1530, when Catherine was still just 11 years old. So all these suggestions are being made about like a 9-10-year-old.
That's crazy.
Right? She's a little girl who lives with nuns in a walled convent. And they're like, maybe we just hand her over and we get out of this mess. And when the city fell, soldiers came in to detain Catherine, and she still wasn't sure because she wasn't getting any news. She's a little girl in a convent that's closed off to everything. She doesn't know if the Holy Roman Emperor is on her side or coming to kill her. Like, she has no idea. And she's been living in a city for her whole life that's been fairly hostile to her. So she got scared, and she just started crying when the soldiers got to the convent. She cried and cried and cried because she was sure they were going to kill her. And the nuns begged the soldiers, like, please just give her a day to calm down. Like, can you just come back tomorrow?
Can you please kidnap her again tomorrow?
Yeah. And the soldiers were like, yeah, fair enough. We'll come back tomorrow. It worked. The nuns convinced them. Because they're all Catholic, too. So they're not trying to piss off the nuns.
No.
And when they returned the next day, 11-year-old Catherine had cut her hair and announced she was becoming a nun. She was taking the veil. She was in the outfit and everything.
Ooh, well played.
She hadn't actually taken her vows yet, but she was saying that she had. Like, I'm a nun. Sorry, what are you going to do? You can't kidnap nuns. And the soldiers did not care and did not believe her, so they detained her anyway. It did not work. So the Pope was working with the Holy Roman Emperor, and he requested that Catherine come to Rome where he was. And it sort of sounds like he's like he's not technically her uncle. He's like a distant cousin, like a second cousin or something. But age-wise and relationship-wise, he was more like an uncle, like a distant uncle that you just don't know very well. And he wanted her to come live with him, so it almost sounds like a Daddy Warbuck situation, like the orphan going to live with the Pope. But likely he just was going to use her to marry her off, to create alliances. He was like, look, I'm her closest, most powerful relative. I'm going to use her to get an alliance.
I mean, there are worse things in life.
I mean, she was growing up in a pretty hostile area, so living with the Pope was probably an upgrade, at least from that. So she went to Rome, and he went looking for a marriage for her. During this time, the preteen Catherine was described as small of stature and thin. She did not have delicate features, and she had sort of protruding eyes that ran in the Medici family. She looked like a Medici. She had like very prominent eyeballs.
Maybe she had a thyroid disorder.
Maybe all the Medicis did, but they all kind of they had a look about them. Because she was related to the Pope and very, very wealthy, suitors lined up, tons of them. King James V of Scotland was put forth as an option. They were like, the Scottish king's looking for a wife. And I have in my notes, if anyone has listened to the Madeleine of France or Marie de Guise episode, we know those are who he married, but neither of those your episode's going to come out before those episodes do. So nobody's listened to those yet.
Spoiler!
So she doesn't marry the King of Scotland. Those episodes are coming up. But then the King of France offered his second son, Henri, Duke of Orleans. And for the people who are saying I need to work on my pronunciation, I would just like to say I pronounced it Henri, not Henry, like I would if I was American. So it's Henry, but in France it's Henri, Duke of Orleans.
And you said Orleans very well.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Henry, Duke of Orleans.
Another American's critique, though.
Right? Yeah, I mean, if I was just reading it like in American English, it would be Henry, Duke of Orleans. But that's very wrong.
Sounds a little podunk.
It's very American. New Orleans is supposed to be New Orleans. And no one says that. We call it New Orleans.
Should. It sounds better.
It does sound better, but we say it like Americans. New Orleans.
There.
The son of the King of France was too good of an offer for the wealthy common girl. He wasn't the heir, but he was the spare. So he was a duke, and, you know, he might be king. Probably not, because he has an older brother, but she was common. She was rich, but she was common, because they wouldn't count her mother being distant nobility as really anything for her. Her father was a common Italian man, so that's what they would have seen her as, a common Italian female.
It's drawing a Meghan Markle comparison here.
A little bit. A little bit, yeah. You're not totally wrong, but things go differently, I think, for this gal. So when Catherine arrived in France, it was a big spectacle. They were basically trying to really nail down the she's rich bitch. Like, she had the best clothes, she had the best entourage. The Pope went all out. The Pope was paying her dowry. The Pope was paying for her arrival. So she showed up in the best of everything. And she had learned a lot of manners because people had always expected she was going to have an important marriage. So when she got there, she went and she kissed the Pope's feet as a greeting, because that's what you do.
Ew.
And I know. They probably didn't clean them so often.
I don't like feet.
And this is when they bathed, like, maybe once a week.
Maybe.
And we don't know if they focused on their feet. Like, maybe their feet were just dipped in the river. Yeah. And then she went to kiss the King of France's feet, her new father-in-law. Because she was all in. She was like, I gotta get out of Italy. People hate me over there. I'm trying to get to France. But when she went to kiss the King of France's feet, he instead hugged her like a father would. He embraced her in a big hug. He was reportedly very fond of her. And
why was it bad that he hugged her?
It's not bad. It's just surprising.
Oh.
He hugged her, and it was kind of heartwarming. He didn't like the official, like, even if officially she was supposed to kiss his feet, he was like, no, that's stupid. Like, this is going to be my daughter. I'm going to give her a hug. It was just surprising. She went for a foot kiss, and he went for a hug. So I feel like it's one of those where you're like, are you going to shake hands? Are you going to, you know?
Oh,
she's
yeah,
like,
you know, awkward shake hand hug.
Right?
Thing.
She's like, I'm trying to kiss your feet. And he's like, I'm just going to hug you. So a little awkward, a little surprising, but not bad at all. She welcomed it. She was like, oh, I've never had parents before.
Maybe he was just ahead of his time and he knew that was disgusting.
Maybe he didn't like feet either. And he's a man, so he's by this point older than his 20s. He's probably in his late 30s at this point. No, not late 30s. He's mid 30s at this point. And he is kind of known, King Francois I of France, as being very sexually active. He liked the ladies.
So probably another syphilis candidate.
There's definitely some syphilis going around French court, yeah. One of his mistresses was actually Anne Boleyn's sister, Mary Boleyn.
Oh.
And he is described by contemporaries as having a very large nose, a muscular buttocks and thighs, and calves that seem too thin for the rest of his body. So I was listening to a different podcast, and they're like, I imagine he just looked like Johnny Bravo. He's like big and bulky, and then he's got thin legs. But
triangle people.
Yes. But he was very charismatic. He reportedly had a nice voice and a very pleasant way of speaking. So once he started talking, you were like, oh, I could dig this guy. He's charming. He was good with the ladies, is what I'm saying. As for the boy she was going to marry, the prince, the Duke of Orleans, they seemed to get along. They hit it off. They were friends, probably. Like, from day one, they had good conversation. They enjoyed speaking together. And Catherine was probably almost immediately in love. She was like, yes, this I can do. Henri was in love with someone else. So that's unfortunate.
Oh.
Catherine and Henri's betrothal lasted 6 months, and she was pumped. She was like, yeah, they were both 14, so that's a bonus. He could have been 87 for all
30.
they know.
Yeah.
Henry was 1 month older than Catherine, so
That's
they're
not
almost
bad.
the same age. Henry was quiet. He had suffered some trauma in his childhood. His father, the charming Francois I, had been captured by the Holy Roman Emperor, the same Holy Roman Emperor that had just saved Catherine from the city. So they hadn't been friends for very long. And the deal was made that the Holy Roman Emperor would release the King of France, and the King of France would pay some money, but just to make sure he paid the money and that he stayed on good behavior, his 2 oldest sons would be sent to Spain, which the Holy Roman Emperor was also the King of Spain, and they would be in Madrid until their father either paid all of the ransom or made some better deal. He's like, I'm going home, you can take my kids, which I feel like is a rude move. Imagine your husband gets captured, and then he's like, okay, well, yeah, I'm coming home, but you have to send your 2 oldest kids there instead.
Rude.
Yeah. And his mom actually made the deal. So the kid's grandmother was like, yeah, I'll take my son back. I'll send you my 2 oldest grandchildren, which would be the heir and the spare. So it'd be like if King Charles got captured in war, and then they're like, send him back. We'll send William and Harry over to be hostages until you do all the things you agreed to do.
As collateral.
Yeah.
Yikes.
So because of this, there was some childhood trauma. The boys, when they got sent over to be hostages, political hostages, were 8 and 7, respectively. So they were little. And they stayed there as hostages for 4 years. Part of the reason that they got sent there was because their mother had died the year before that. So they didn't have her to be like, no, you can't just send my kids to Spain.
Right.
So they had lost their mom. A year later, they got sent to be hostages. So those formative years were rough. But after 4 years, the princes were back in France. The problem is that over those 4 years, their father hadn't really behaved and all the payments hadn't really come on time. So they were slowly treated worse and worse while they were over there. The longer they were in Spain, the worse they were treated. And they reportedly were under heavy guard. They needed 500 guards just to go outside and play. And they reportedly were instructed not to speak French, probably because they were like, we can't have them plotting behind our back. And when they got back to France, the rumor was that they no longer spoke French.
I mean, probably true.
Yeah, especially if they were like told don't speak French.
Little.
And bare minimum, it would be stunted. They would still be like 7 and 8, like when the last time they spoke French at best. And that's if they remembered. And so their father didn't really trust them. They were far too Spanish to be proper French kings. But, like, whose fault is that?
I mean, it's not their fault. They were left for dead.
It was their father's fault. And now he's the one that's like, oh, I don't trust them. They're very Spanish. You sent them to Spain, homie. What is happening? When they were released, Prince Francois, the older brother, was very forgiving of their captors. He was like, thank you for having us. I hope we can move forward and have a spectacular relationship between France and Spain. He was a very good heir. Prince Henri didn't.
Oh.
He was like, F you, smell you never. Like, I'm out. He was mad, and he made it pretty obvious. He was younger. He was a year younger than his brother.
That's probably why.
His brother was the heir. He was 1 year younger, and he was the spare.
Mm-hmm.
And likely his brother maybe got treated a little better because his brother was, in theory, the future king of France. Whereas Henri was the spare. He was a duke. Probably wasn't going to be that important, so he was likely treated worse. But now they're home, and he's 14, and he's been home for a few years now. The same emperor that had him held hostage for 4 years is the same emperor that held Catherine under siege as a child, and he was trying to save her, but both of them had traumatic childhoods, and you could say both kind of from the same guy.
Mm-hmm.
He was a busy guy, and likely they bonded over their traumatic childhoods. They were like, oh yeah, that guy, he's problematic. Even when he's helping, he's problematic. He burned all our food.
I was kidnapped too.
Right? Like, relatable.
Thanks for listening.